Okay, welcome back to part two. I apologize that my voice is a little deep tonight. This is just a recap. Got this utility trailer at the client's suggestion. And this is the vision boards that they developed with their marketing team. This was not designed by a trailer designer per se. It was designed by a marketing team, graphic design team. They did a lot of research in what they wanted, what they looked at. And this branding team has gone out with vintage trailers, recycled trailers, trailers that have been modified into kitchens. And they thought, considering so many things go wrong with them, they were inheriting somebody else's project in many cases, what they could find on Facebook Market. So they decided to go from scratch, which is why, that answers the question, why did they just start with this? Why didn't they just go buy one? Because they've done this several times. And so this is an experiment of sorts. So we have this travel trailer, which carries about 2,000 pounds. The axle's rated at 3,000 pounds. And again, this is just a little briefing recap of what I did to build the vision that they had given me in drawings. And it used 2-inch by 2-inch 16 gauge tubing. And this is all covered in part one. I'm just doing a really brief showdown. And I used the 2x2 tubing as sort of the bones for the entire structure, and 2x2 2x4s as the in-between supports. Laminated it with 1/8-inch plywood to be able to develop the curves, and they're all hands on deck right there. And this is all, I forget what gauge, probably 18 gauge aluminum, I'm guessing. I can't remember. And as per the drawing, I made all these doors. And I did this because this is a type of project that Taylor and I always wanted to do. And here I'm getting paid to do it. After all was said and done, the profit margin dwindled fairly quickly. But I will settle that with the client. We'll figure out all the unforeseen expenses. I haven't settled up yet, but it's a marketing team I've done all my work with. They're close friends at this point. And that's where that video ended, right there, where we built the exterior. A lot of people commented that I didn't have the proper lighting across the back top, which I added. You'll see. And so, by the way, this is the vision board for the interior of the trailer, which now is what this video's main focus is. And Taylor, my girlfriend, worked with the client picking various materials. And so the first thing I had to do was put a floor in, a subfloor, and I had lots of that aluminum left over, so I just used a lot of PL glue in this project. You're going to see a lot of those tubes. And I used construction adhesive to put down a lot of this aluminum to cover broad spaces to create basically a splash protector, and began the seal as in protect from water, of the floor. And now this is just a heavy piece of plastic, and I used zip boards and I faced it paint down just for more added protection. This is not going to be a camper people live in, so that's one thing to kind of consider. It's kind of like a boat. It probably will ultimately get water damage to some extent, depending upon the climate it's in. We did our best to seal it completely off. Every seam in the aluminum gets pumped full of clear silicone ultimately. You won't necessarily see that, but I'm telling you that's what I did. Again, the zip boards, this is going to land between the wheel wells. And screwing the zip board down right now. And now this gives me a nice sturdy floor. It actually gives me the feel for the interior right now, because just having that strip of wood down the middle and not feeling the full girth of the interior, it suddenly felt really big, maybe almost too big. So I'm a little nervous. I'm going on the specs the client gave me. So we're at a full, we're at 95 inches wide on the 94 inches wide on the inside. No, 92 inches wide on the inside, and over 12 feet front to back. Now these windows I didn't attack only because I did not know what windows would go there yet. The client had spec'd them, and I was looking for square windows, and thankfully a lot of commenters and fans mentioned to me that you can't put square windows in because they tend to break, and they also tend to break the skin. Because if you put a square cut, which, at this point I put square cuts around the vending windows, but they also have a steel frame around them. So these windows glue in, and I put a lot more glue off camera. Ultimately, I ended up clear siliconing them around the edge. And I cut open the vent in the top. These are two things I left out of part one only because I still wasn't 100% sure. They weren't spec'd specifically, and there was no vent spec'd in the original drawings. But I took some liberties, assuming nobody was paying close attention, and everybody would be okay with me taking some liberties, some standard liberties, like putting in a ceiling vent. And that's obviously what you see me doing there, putting that ceiling vent in. And you could see right there a strip of rivets weren't installed. That was at the end of video 1, knowing the project wasn't done. And now I jumped through time here, and you see Patrick is drilling holes for the conduit. And he just uses Romex, I believe, as if it's just a house. We're going with an inverter and two storage batteries. I think they're 100 amp hour batteries. That wasn't my thing. I left that up to Patrick and Taylor to design the electrical system, so I can't with confidence tell you exactly what it was, but Patrick speaks on it in a few minutes in the video. But here he wanted to make sure that the wiring wasn't going to get nailed accidentally by me, the crazy mad battery gun nailer. And he puts nail protectors over wherever he puts a wooden pass-through. Here you see the lights. They're 110 transformers, which go down to 12 volts on the lights. Actually, Taylor realized she made a mistake speccing these because the 110 volts, obviously using the 110 volts inverter capacity, it could have just went directly to 12 volts. But I knew making this there was going to be several things I either did wrong or did sort of as a first draft, which I would correct in a second version. And we wanted that one panel I just brought in, which is a thicker piece of zip board. It's going to carry the wall that has the batteries on it and the inverter. So Patrick suggested we do something just a little bit thicker. And there you see the lights are actually, they're plugged into the wall, but they are the lights that are in the trailer. So that's the light provided to the trailer, those 6 puck lights. And now I'm in the other shop, and I'm building cabinets, and I'm using 1/2-inch Baltic birch plywood. And the first thing I'm making is the cabinet bases. Obviously, everything has to be made in pieces, and I'm trying to be economical, so I'm using as much of the wood that I already have as possible. I'm so over budget on this thing. I'm just using what I actually currently have. The client was okay with painting the cabinets because, in my opinion, a kitchen like that's going to get used and abused. If you put laminate on the doors, I've been in a lot of clients' homes where the laminate in a busy kitchen will peel up and break, and that's impossible for the client to fix and a pain in the ass for the handyman to fix. So in a busy kitchen like this, I suggested we just paint everything, because if laminate peels and chips, or if the paint scratches or wears off, you just keep a can of paint at home base and you just repaint the cabinets quickly with a foam roller and you're back to normal. Especially since the client liked copper, the color copper, so it's a copper colored cabinet. Which gives me the opportunity to use up some plywood here, getting rid of some old 1/4-inch plywood that I had. And in the back of the cabinets, I could piece together random pieces. Ultimately, I tried to do a few seams as possible. But this is just some old school cabinet making. And I use the 1/2 inch because I'm really conscious of weight the entire time. I'm still a little nervous. I'm overweight. I mean, I pretty feel that I'm pretty overweight. But, and there's my drawing. I do a sketch of what I need to do. I take my dimensions and then I do a couple of sketches, and I constantly keep looking at the pencil sketch I did. Helps me remember where I am, what I've done. That pencil sketch is my little road map, and also helps me organize. And now here I am just doing a dry fit. And there was a little bit of a going back and forth. Should we laminate all the walls before we put the cabinets in? Or should we laminate the cabinets, laminate the walls up to the cabinets? Turns out, for timing, and now the cabinets are in and out to fit over the wheel hubs and to notch into each other. And the service windows intersect the height of the cabinets. So a quick solution Taylor came up with, she said, let's, instead of making all the cabinets too low, or the counters too low, let's notch the service window so that people walk up to like a bar. It's a perfect idea. And this is for the back service window.
Okay, I want to do a quick update in the middle of the edit because a lot of this stuff is just too intimate to film. A lot of minutia. And what you see here is a template to cut the corian. This is a template that I made out of thin plywood, simply just to set up to cut the corian. In the next couple of clips, you're going to see all these cabinets outside so that Patrick could do the electrical while I finish doing the undermount sink, the trough here that's going to carry some bottles and ice, and you'll see we notched in a step here for the consumer that comes up to the cart. Same here. This is just 1/8 inch plywood I laid in place and I flush routed. And because of whatever treatment we're going to add here, I need to add this at 1/8 of an inch, and I'll do that. But this is the corian template. This is going to be one full piece of corian. And these two individual pieces will all get glued together. Now with the kitchen out here, I can fit the tops while Patrick works on the electric.
And now I have the sink in place there, so I'm routering the sink hole. I believe the actual sink is in there still. Yeah, it is, because now I'm nervous. I don't want to scratch the brand new stainless sink. So instead of letting the router kiss it, I put tape up under the edge of it because I don't want the router, even though it's a router bearing, sometimes the bearing could seize up and it could burn the inside of your surface you're running off of, so you got to be careful. And there's the little service window sink. It's really going to basically be an ice tray, and there is a lead that goes back to the main drain. So corian comes 12 inches by 12 feet. 30 inches by 12 feet. Is that what I said? 30 inches by 12 feet. And it's a 1/2 inch thick approximately. And this has always been, I've only done a few corian jobs in my life, but for me, I always like cutting it with a jigsaw, typically with a metal cutting blade. I didn't have one, just used like a fine wood cutting blade. And I'm probably telling the camera that right now. And then the last time I did corian, I did not have an oscillating tool, but it's perfect for cutting inside corners like that. And when I showed this on Instagram, a lot of people right away said you need rounded corners, otherwise that's all going to crack inside the trailer. It probably will crack anyway, because the trailer is going to flex. But I left myself enough room at any inside corner to router, for instance, inside of the sinks, so that I'd have the width. And I needed to add a little bit. And corian comes with a glue that is the exact color. You have to buy it, and you get like a certain number of feet out of each tube. And then once that glue dries, it's an epoxy. It dries fast, mixes in a tip. And so I have the factory edge of my Corian, and I'm using that as my straight edge to clean up all of my jigsaw cuts. So I stay right at my Sharpie line, so my jigsaw cuts are only going to need to be taken 1/16 of an inch off. You got to really concentrate. And now here I am with the piece that's going to be that back service window, and I'm using the sink itself, the stainless steel sink, as my pattern guide. And now we're bringing the cabinets in. This is going to be the final time we bring them in. What do we got here, Pat? What is this squirt thing?
This is the inverter, so this is going to take 12 volts from our 12 volt 100 amp hour batteries. There's going to be 2 of them, so we got 200 amp hours. And then that's going to feed into this. This converts it to 120 AC.
So you have outlets, like regular house outlets, kind of.
Yeah, house outlets, and the lighting that we have is also 120 volts. So this will feed those 120.
Right.
And then we'll also have, you can come over here and feed DC power.
Right.
That thing weighed what felt like 100 pounds, probably weighs 60 pounds. It's probably full of copper, obviously very expensive. And that's why we were really careful to make sure that wall could handle bounce. We also installed a couple of 2x6s in that wall, just nailers to take the weight, and that the screws would have some meaning. And now this is the plug that's going to feed the batteries from the outside. It was kind of the first time we penetrated the hull, so we were a little nervous. This is the sink. I did not cut the sink hole in the Corian before I'm bringing it in, because I don't want it to break right in the notch, the window notch. See how close it is to the window notch? A little bit of the flex you put on that Corian, it's going to want to spider from any place that's relatively sharp. Just using panel glue to glue it all down. Lots of panel glue here. And I started talking before about the decision to leave the walls open while I finish the cabinets, and that's really was just a matter of timing. Turns out it was all fine anyway, because I saved on some materials, not repeatedly having to cover anything. So no waste behind the cabinets, unnecessary redundancy. But now the walls are going to sit on top of the edge of the counters, all the wall treatments, and that's going to transfer the weight to the middle of the trailer, which is going to give it all together a lot more security and firmness. So now here I am, I'm making the bottom of my so-called U-turn here. You see I'm using the Corian glue, and I'm gluing the sink in at the same time. And you want to make sure that those joints are extremely matched. So I'm putting just like the width of a piece of paper under one side of the joint to make sure that it's matched, because that'll save you a lot of sanding. Let that glue dry really, really good, maybe at least for an hour. Sand it. Now I'm coming back down the other side of the U-turn, and I have that glue in there. And you see how I had to add a little piece to go inside the service window notch there, and that's the epoxy gun that comes from Corian. And obviously you got to spec the color, because once you sand the joints, the color literally, in most cases, disappears. Now this is me drilling out the hole for the sink, and I drilled in each corner, and I stayed about an inch from the wall just to make extra sure. And you see, I realize I'm a little too far away. I can take a little bigger of a bite. I don't want to turn all that into sawdust, into flaky dust. It's too floaty. You don't want those in your nose. So I cut a little bit closer, and I put a few layers of tape inside, so the bearing obviously will protect it, as I already described. But I want to also have a finish pass, and I made extra sure my bearing was rolling. I put some oil on the bearing, and I took the tape off, and that gave me my 10th thou finish pass, so that my final cut is a nice, clean, thin cut. If you take too much, even in Corian, you'll get some chip out. You got to be careful. It's always nice if you can do a finish pass like that, like take the girth of a piece of tape. Now we start the sink installation, or the hardware, and tailor spec all this with the client. And I had never put any of these in before, so I was really super neurotic. I knew I was going down a learning path, and hopefully we hit it on the head. Taylor did lots of the research. Taylor did most of the research on what we needed. Thank God for YouTube, because a lot of these answers are on YouTube. So we have to put in a sink and a drainage system, and the sink needs a pump. I almost lost my cutting head there. So I'm drilling through the floor. A lot of custom joinery here with the plumbing. I had to improvise a lot. So we go from a drain pipe to PVC pipe, and I had to swell the end of that drain pipe so that it would fit directly inside the other pipe, going through the floor. And we have to hang the drain container. So there's a storage container that carries the clean water and a storage container that carries the gray water. And these are my straps. And I bought this bending brake a long time ago, and it comes in handy when I least expect it, and I'm always thankful that I bought it. And I'm just covering these with just some black paint. There's no doubt they're going to get rusty. These get installed up underneath, and that's our gray water tank that carries all the water from the drain. Everything has to be forward of the wheels, between the wheels and the tongue. All the heavy stuff has to be forward of the wheels. If you put them behind the wheels, you'd unhook from the truck and the thing would just do a wheelie. So that's why you want to keep all your weight towards your tongue. And this is my first trailer, so please be gentle in the comments. And this is a combination of improvisation, YouTube looking, Taylor educating me because she spent more time looking at the video, and then me taking all that and mutating it through my process and then making it over. Now this is the drain pipe, and I didn't want to have to cut the frame, and I have a little understanding of how water works, and as long as that drain entrance hole there is lower than the sink drain entrance hole, water will sit in those low spots on the pipe, and that's okay with me because it'll always get replaced with the very next batch of water. And now we have to skin the interior, and so that's what I'm doing now. I'm making a surface for the laminate to sit on, and also you don't want to have to touch the walls and break through the laminate. This gives you some support. I use 1/4-inch plywood, and in some cases I knew that I was going to put laminate. Oh, don't use a table saw like me. I knew I was going to put laminate on another piece to skin into. So you'll see what I mean. There's another little cabinet that I thought that in time I would cut into, but I did not. There you can see our switch panel. And now I'm using a lot of the scrap up, as I described earlier on. There I needed a tapered piece. I got rid of a lot of scrap on the walls, because this is all getting laminated over. Especially this particular wall, as per the client's drawing, they wanted that wall covered with wood planks. And so for durability and simplicity, we ordered flooring, so that wall gets covered with flooring, like a snap and go flooring. And what you see me cutting here are the Mdf cabinet doors. Again, in terms of keeping things light, went with lightweight MDF on the doors. And as I said earlier, I know that these doors are going to get beat up. And this is my European hinge mounting jig. I make this to go on either side of the door. That's why the holes are drilled through. I mount the hinges, whether it's the left jamb or the right jamb. I mount the hinges on that, and then I use that as my guide to mount the hinges in place. Make sure that it works and I have the right spacing. I have a little piece there to space down from the counter. And then I use that same exact piece to drill the holes in the doors. So then I just bring that right over to the door, right over to the hinges that are already in place. I know this is ass backwards, but this is how I always do it, and it always works for me perfectly. I get perfect spacing. The best thing about European hinges is you could adjust your spacing. And you want a parallel line, and that's like basically the brains of the whole trailer are in those two cabinets. We have the plumbing installed, the drain installed, the counters installed. Each one of these steps was putting my mind at ease. And then it got a little nerve-wracking having to do some of these more challenging parts like this curve piece, but I came up with a really good solution. And I didn't come up with the solution until I was right there about to do it, which is why I say it's really important to let your mind marinate on these things. Don't demand an answer. It'll come to you. Your brain is working on it even though you're not thinking about it.
91 inches, so this is the cutoff. And I use the cutoff off of there. So that's my stopping point. This is 48 inches, so I put the stopper on there and we'll glue it and snap the next one in. Thank you.
In my mind, I'm thinking, how am I going to get 6 people together to keep that curve in place while I throw nails in it? And then the inside curve, you just put a stopper at the bottom of the board and a stopper at the top, and you just snap it in place. If my joinery was perfect, I wouldn't even need nails. I threw a couple in there just to satisfy my mind.
Is this starting to make sense?
Oh, it was upside down the whole time. Yeah, it's starting to make sense. I'm ready to run a test on it now.
Pat's hooking up that. So Pat, you realized all this electric needed a lot more. Basically, you needed to make the fire hose as big as possible.
Yeah, the amperage was, it has to be rated to take up to 300 amps.
Wow.
It's kind of a 10 to 1 step down, so if you're going to pull 30 amps, you have to be able to provide 300 amps.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's 12 volts going up to 120. It's a 10 times 10x. So if you're going to pull 10 amps here, you need to pull 100 amps here. 30 amps here, 300 amps here.
Wow.
So
We're not going to pull more than 30 amps out of this, are we?
no, but that's what that panel's rated for.
Right, so you
And
just have
that's
to
what
cover.
the max is on everything. Yeah, so we could always add another string of batteries next door, right in the cabinet next door, parallel it out and increase the runtime.
Right, but right now...
Right now this is a good enough system. We're only really powering up LED lights in the ceiling and then some kick lighting underneath and some festoon lighting outside, which is all going to be LED.
And then occasionally the sink pump, which is...
Yeah, the sink pump, but it's going to run for a few seconds.
Yeah.
That's about 7 amps DC
Yeah.
that's going to pull. But we're hoping with the amount of load on this thing is it could run for about 5 or 6 hours.
Right, we'll find.
And now I'm filling up the storage tank from the outside. I get a big gallon jug of water. And you'll notice you see water going in there now. I'm on the outside. My camera outside was dead. I didn't realize it. I thought it was filming me. Fill in. It takes 30 gallons of water, I believe, which is quite a bit of water. And then me and Pat hook the sink up, and then we take the water pump for a test ride right here.
We charged the water system. After a little bit of fiddling, we got some pressure shut off. So that pressure shut off, and so this should release some water and also come back on. Oh, very nice. How nice is that?
The only thing is it's going to come on every time you turn that valve on. Right?
It's all right. You just tested everything.
Yeah, so right now we have 120 volts coming in from outside. It's plugged into here. And you can disconnect that right there if you need to kill the 120 volts. But anyway, when this is 120 volts, this thing comes on automatically and goes into charging mode. So it'll trickle charge your batteries. And then the 120 volts coming in goes through a bypass in here and it feeds through to the panel. So you can kind of draw whatever you want up to 20 amps through that. And then it's charging your batteries at the same time. As soon as it sees that it loses its 120 volts, then this thing switches into inverter and it'll start pulling power from your batteries, inverting it to 120 volts, and then still feeding your panel. So you really shouldn't even see any disruption of power.
Nice. And then this is in the event that they want to put solar. That's the solar receptacle.
Yep. So you just put in your positive and negative there coming off your photovoltaic cells, and then this will trickle charge your batteries at the same time. And then this is your DC power.
Nice.
That's running. Let's see this. There you go.
That was the one thing I was excited about.
Yeah.
With the wiring all wrapped up inside the walls, now I can cover up the ceilings, and you see me drilling out holes for the puck lighting that gets inserted into the ceiling. Everything gets laminate glue, PL glue, and I did a little trick here. I was working alone, and I put 2 little notches there, so that works well with the 1/4-inch material, not so much when it's thinner. Did the same trick here, and I was able to put those up easily enough. And now I'm beginning my laminate. This is frog tree laminate. It's basically Formica. It's all it is. And like the Corian, I rough cut it with a razor blade in this case, and then I'll router it clean against the edge of the table with a bearing cutter. Now this is my first piece I'm installing, and I have that notch and the outlet to be contending with. And I have these 2 big windows, but I glue it in place first, and then with my Dremel tool I put a little starter hole, and then with my router, I'm free-handing the router because there's no room for the base in many circumstances. And then I cut my window out. I could not have made that piece on the table and brought it in without breaking it. This laminate is extremely fragile. I broke 2 pieces during the installation, which I did not catch on camera. One while I was moving it. The second one, me and Chris Zepp was helping me make everything. And we broke it, installing it over the curve. This is Chris and I installing the successful first one. And because this went so well, I was like, we don't need to film the second one. And that was the fun one. And you can see here, Zepp brought his zip poles to hold up the ceiling. It was a great idea. And that we're laughing because the first attempt was destroyed. It broke into 100 pieces, and we had PL glue in our hair. But we were successful getting that curve up and around. Ended up using about 8 sheets of material all in. And Taylor came up with an interesting solution to cover the seams. Typically, this laminate would all be installed with a good contact cement. I didn't have the opportunity to do that because there was no way I was going to be able to land these in the exact right spot with contact cement. So you'll see how where the sheets meet, they pucker a little bit. So it was Taylor's suggestion, cut a 1-inch strip of the laminate and use VHB glue from 3M and lay the strip over it. And so at one point you'll see me do that. But here I'm installing the lighting. I wanted to get the lighting pucks in because they are holding the ceiling up. Taking a phone call. So the lighting pucks are additionally keeping the ceiling in place while the glue dries. Just testing out the lights, and it's slowly coming together. It's funny, at each one of these milestones I'm watching now, I'm really excited. I remember how excited I was. I'm probably explaining everything I just said. So, in that scene we're going to cover with that stuff. And I was, there it is. That was my first test strip. I thought about covering every scene with aluminum, but I'm glad that Taylor thought of that solution.
I made templates to get the exact perfect curve out of cardboard. I'm going to pull these out and make panels with the laminate on it and glue them in place, and that's how I'm going to do that wall. And then this wall holds up this wall, so it serves a couple purposes. It makes installation easy, but it also serves the purpose of keeping the ceiling in place.
And I'm using 1/8-inch plywood from Home Depot, and I'm doing my best to cut it as perfect as I can, and then I do a test fit or 2. And once I know that that laminate piece fits perfectly, or that plywood, And then I'm just doing it's called a slip sheet. It didn't work very well, where you put a piece between your two contact cemented surfaces and you slip it out. So I'm using the router, flush cut router, to make that fit onto that perfectly. And here you see me gluing that board right in. And now I have a perfect match fit on that curved edge because I took the time to do it. If I was trying to get that laminate to fit in there without the backing, you see that's the other side now. It just would have been too difficult. You want to try and make your process as easy as possible. If that, by giving up a quarter of an inch of width of the room, then there I am installing that VHB I was talking about, installing another piece of it. VHB stands for very high bond. It's the tape that comes on like GoPro mounts and stuff. And now this is the wall. This is the snap and go flooring, which was difficult to tell you what. It's difficult to snap and go it on a wall that you can't really jump on with your feet. So I opted, and I don't show it, but I just took it to the table saw and cut off the locks on everything. Because now you got to lock it going down and lock it going sideways, and I just wasn't going to be hammered on the edge of all these things. Scribing to fit. Just using, I don't think I actually show me scribing, but I show you the net result of the scribing. And in the client drawing, they mentioned something about having like an old board wall. So Taylor's like, what if we just buy flooring and stick it on the wall? And they like that idea because it's all pre-finished. And now this is the inside of the door. I'm just showing you that I used a rubbing to get everything I needed out of the lock area. I had to cut that all out anyway because the door got too thick for right where the lock was. So I had to inset the lock I had to take out that whole 1/4 inch panel. Now this is the copper color the client picked for the cabinet doors. And we roller painted everything. Ryan's doing the difficult stuff this old man can't reach. And I didn't put the floor in until the very last because I didn't want to destroy it going in and out of the trailer 1,000 times with all construction debris. And now this was my biggest fear, once we got past the electric and the plumbing, was the fit and the finishing. Making sure that every one of these edges were resolved in a good, clean, good-looking manner. And I was able to do that. And each door jamb, each edge was a problem to be solved. And in some cases, I went back and made them look better than I do on camera here. But I was ultimately very happy with all this aluminum edging. You could see it. That door has a nice positive closing. I glued everything, but then once the glue dried, I went back and I put pop rivets in mostly everything you see. So I don't explicitly show that, but a lot of you are going to comment and say, that glue is not going to hold too long. It certainly won't. That's why I put pop rivets. I followed up with pop rivets in a lot of them. And now that the doors were painted, sanded, painted a couple times, I can go back in. Because all those hinges were numbered and adjusted for the location that they were in, I numbered what hinges go where inside the socket of the hinge itself. So I wrote like 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. Or usually I write U and L for upper and lower. And there. And in place, the panels get all lightly sanded and painted one more time. But now this is a huge accomplishment. I didn't think I'd ever get this far. I jokingly always say, you could always give the money back and say it didn't work. And I still was thinking that right here. I could always give them the money back and just keep the trailer. I don't know what I'm babbling on. I'm probably saying what I just said. But this is a kitchen. There's no bed and there's no bathroom. It's going to be used for marketing. And these stainless steel locks I got from Home Depot. And now this is something I talk about in the fit and the finishing. They came off of the 1-inch trim, so I cut a piece of aluminum. I got some flat 2-inch stock, and I cut a couple of little spots so that they didn't just hang in space. Everything had a resolution, as much as I could possibly think of. This flooring is a cork flooring. I'm wearing Jesse Savage's cool shirt. Thanks, Jesse. I never thanked you for that shirt. And I did the same thing here. I was having a hard time getting that snap and go to snap and go. So I just cut it off with a razor blade. And then getting everything to fit in everywhere. And this is a cork flooring with MDF back. So I couldn't hit it too hard with a hammer because it would put a dimple in it. And now this is under cabinet lighting with a little strip of VHB on the back of it, very high bond. And there it is. I thought it was multicolor. It's only the one color. There's a little trick I came up with putting in the cabinet poles. It's ambidextrous, very similar to the way I do the hinges. Ambidextrous, which means it's the holes drilled completely through it. I can use it on the left door or the right door. And I learned doing the first one that I'll get a blowout. So I half drill from both directions on each door using the same jig, and I meet the hole in the middle. Wow, the accomplishment here, the sense of accomplishment is unreal. And now this goes back to the solution we came up with was to take whatever corian was left over and piece it together and have it stick out. And I still haven't put my pump jacks to hold the door open yet. And so that's going to stick out about an inch. But when they pack up the tent to go, they're going to have to pull those shelves out to be able to close the door. Now, these are pump jacks or gas struts. I don't know what they're called. And I got these on Amazon, just a generic. And the hardware was something that I saw in the pictures and knew it was going to be wrong. But I said, when I get it, I'll figure it out. And when I got it, I figured it out. I was able to use that hardware with my circumstance. These are meant to go inside a concealed lid, like the lid of, say, for instance, a cooler, where that goes against like the back of a cabinet, not necessarily on the side of the door jamb. I'm really excited that it works. Now these, to be honest, these are the right size. The door hangs open level. I'm so excited. The back door hangs open a little higher, but whatever. If that's the worst, I'll take it. There's our wall. There's our corian cabinet tops. Our doors. I put some supports inside the doors who have water on demand. We have a switch that shuts off the water pump so it goes off completely, so it's never on full time. We have cabinets you could repaint on the fly. We have good lighting. And we have these ice chests for the back service window. I shored up the frame and the tongue a little bit with 2x2 box tubing. I U-bolted it in place. I didn't show too much of that because it's kind of boring. And man alive, do I feel like I just turned in a term paper. It's going to be nice to get that room back. I've had this project in the shop now for 9 months. But the work you see represented in this video on the interior started November 16th, and I finished January 3rd. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you stuck through to the end. I really appreciate it.